Our brains are made mostly of fat, so why not nourish them with the highest quality omega-3s available? Omega-3 Rejuvenate from Big Bold Health. Omega-3 Rejuvenate is a premium blend of pure oils from wild-caught Alaskan cod and sockeye salmon, sourced from the pristine waters of Alaska. This is not the story of other brands. The fact is, most of the world's fish oil products are produced from several types of species packed into nets in commercial fishing zones, loaded into the holds of vessels that stay out for days or even weeks, and put in processing plants that treat them with high heat, chemicals, and synthetic nutrients. Big Bold Health does it differently. All of it straight from the sea into the hands of skilled fishermen, instantly flash frozen and taken to their specially designed shoreside plant using a low-heat technique to extract the pure amber omega oil that contains all natural and abundant full-spectrum omega-3s, including EPA, DHA, as well as DPA, plus all natural vitamins A and D, and naturally occurring pro-resolving mediators to support cardiovascular, cognitive, and immune health. Their unique low-temperature extraction preserves the natural goodness of the fish, so you get maximum benefits in every soft gel. No fillers, no shortcuts, just pure, potent wellness. Visit bigboldhealth.com/Hoffman and experience the difference. That's bigboldhealth.com/Hoffman for Omega-3 Rejuvenate. Use coupon code Hoffman20 for 20% off site-wide. Welcome back to today's Intelligent Medicine Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ronald Hoffman, with what I hope will be a resource to parents of autistic kids, family members, grandparents, because there is hope beyond some of the limited options, behavioral options available for autistic kids, because we need to take an all-of-the-above approach, looking at a biological model, a functional medicine model of autism, because a lot may be going on in kids that can be corrected with low-tech, relatively inexpensive, and low-risk options. With us today, Teresa Lyons, who's a Yale University-trained scientist, and her website is autism, AWETISM.net. And Dr. Lyons, you actually deliberately chose to misspell autism there because you wanted to make it like a positive thing, like encourage people. Like it wasn't just like you're relegated to this diagnosis and, that's just the way it's going to be.
Yeah. Well, so when my daughter was diagnosed with autism, I hated that word.
Okay.
I would think of that word and I would just get mad and frustrated, and this wasn't the way parenting was supposed to be, and our life changed in so many different ways, and it was not easy whatsoever. But then as my daughter got healthier and we did different things, then I could see how determined she was, and I could see just her spirit, and that's when I saw autism very differently, in the sense of I was in awe of just how determined she was to participate in life and create the life that she wanted. So that helped me just have a different perspective on autism. So that's why I spelled it.
What seemed like a curse to you initially turned out to be an inspiring experience for you and your family. Do you have other kids as well?
Nope, just one.
So it's just a one-off. But, autism can place an incredible burden on families and on relationships as well. So it's kind of you have to view it as not just an individual problem, but as a family dynamic issue as well. And I think you have advice and inspiration for families coping with autism as well.
Certainly. So there's new research coming out about PTSD and autism parents. And this is something that it's important to talk about. So the research shows there's an increased risk for the parent themselves to get a PTSD diagnosis from raising the child with autism or and emotional dysregulation. So this is a very stressful experience to go through. Autism meltdowns, it's not something we talked about too much, but they can be very traumatic for the person with autism, as well as the parents or anyone else watching them. So it is an extremely stressful journey to be on. And it's important for parents to acknowledge that and to seek help and support so that they can really maintain their health, their physical health and their mental health for the long term.
And there's community available to help support that journey. And it also can be an opportunity for tremendous personal development. Accepting the challenge and then surmounting the challenges, I think, can be a very, very enlightening journey.
It definitely can be when you're on the other side of it.
Yes.
Like, so I can sit here and talk about, yes, it was very enlightening, and I'm a completely different person. But throughout this journey, there have been many, many times where I've just collapsed in exhaustion, just laid on the floor and be like, I don't know what to do next. I don't know where to go. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. I mean, there's so much as a parent that gets challenged that it is very difficult at times.
Well, let's talk about some of the nutritional and also supplemental strategies, which for some kids can pan out, and perhaps that you've experienced in your journey.
Sure. So we can start with gluten-free, right? So that is something that is very popular, going gluten-free now in many different therapeutic areas, and it's much easier to go gluten-free now. Gluten has a mechanism of action that impacts every human, all in the same way. And for someone who
so
has
not just celiac patients,
health,
because we tend to think of it as an on-off phenomenon. Either you have celiac disease or you're fine.
yes, I would say that is the way many people think about it, but I don't think that is the correct way to think about it, especially when your immune system is overexerted.
Okay.
Right? So kids with autism, many times, not all of them, but many times, you'll hear parents who change their diet, remove gluten, and then all of a sudden, so many things change, and they start talking, and they start, behaviors are okay and sleeping. And it really comes from
it's like the movie Awakening, with Robin Williams. Like all of a sudden they seem to come out of it. Yeah, it's dramatic.
Yeah, it always seems like all of a sudden, but I can tell you for all the parents that has happened to, no one is like, oh, wow, this just changed overnight, right? It may look like overnight, but it's not overnight. So with gluten, it makes the body more permeable. Mm-hmm. And so it does that for everyone. When I eat some gluten, my gut will be more permeable. My immune system will step in. It's functioning quite well. It's not occupied with any other things right now. So it steps in after like 20 minutes or so. My gut goes back to the tightness that is appropriate, right?
Tight
so
junctions
our small intestine.
Lack of intestinal permeability, leaky gut, etc. Right.
Correct. So we want our gut to be permeable so that all the good nutrients can go into our body and our bloodstream, but we don't want it to be so permeable that larger things, undigested food, larger toxins and things like that get into the body. So there is this balance. So when a child has autism and they eat gluten, their gut will become more permeable, more things get into their body than it should. And then the immune system comes in and steps in and cleans it up and closes it up. However, if their immune system is occupied, let's say, with air pollution exposure or mold or something else, right? So the immune system is not as efficient, then it takes longer for that gut to go back to the permeability that is appropriate. And now, not only does gluten make the gut more permeable, but gluten also is that little magic key for the central nervous system, for our brain and our spine. So many times kids with autism, that's the last thing you want to do is make their brain more permeable, right? Because now you're going to open it up to neuroinflammation and a whole host of other things. So kids who have that as part of one of the root causes, the immune system involvement, a lot of times those are the kids that respond really well to going gluten-free because you're taking off that additional burden on the immune system. And there are kids sometimes who start to potty train themselves because now they can actually feel when they're wet. And so there's different aspects to the central nervous system that help a body function optimally, right? And so some parents see that difference when they remove gluten. They see other things change, like the child's body becomes a lot more calm. There might be less meltdowns. Again, right, you're removing that burden on the immune system. But it's not the same for every person.
Sure.
So that's really where a parent has to have that lens of, okay, I understand the mechanism of action. Is there a lot of immune system involvement with my child?
It's
And
almost
if
like you have to have
yes,
your own
then
home science fair project to some extent. Yeah.
well, you have to become a strategist,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
you've got to know, I've got to understand the information, and then I've got to say, okay, does that apply to my child?
Okay. And, there's this other theory about gluten, and has to do with properties of gluten, the gliadomorphins, the fact that there are certain stoner peptides that are created by gluten, and similarly, what are called casomorphins. The word morphin is in both of those, and those actually sound a little like morphine, but that means that they have some effects, morphine-like effects, stoner effects, or perhaps constipating effects at the very least, because we know that, opiates are constipating. And so, at the very least, you can sometimes alleviate constipation by getting rid of some of these foods. And that may change the microbiome in a positive way and set off a whole cascade of beneficial consequences.
Correct. And now with the dairy, you touched upon the casomorphins. So with dairy, a lot of times dairy increases inflammation. And especially, having just regular milk. And so with leucovorin is a topic that is immensely popular right now.
Yeah, that was part of the big, the big reveal, the cause of autism, the press conference. Leucovorin was in the news. And so give us a primer. What is this all about?
Okay, so leucovorin, just to backtrack, leucovorin is prescription vitamin B9. It is generic. There is no company that's making a huge profit. Yes, folate. Folinic acid is the name of it. And what has been found, for the most part, is that about 70% of kids with autism have antibodies in their brain that block the main way of folate that gets into the brain. So 5-MTHF is usually how people get folate, right? That's the typical supplement. However, when there are these antibodies that are blocking 5-MTHF, the folate getting into the brain, you just basically have to go side door, which is leucovorin, a different formulation, but B9.
So you need to say, excuse me, that if they just take a B complex or even a folic acid, that's not going to get past the receptor blockade, that you have to use this targeted approach? Is that what the idea is? So
yeah, folinic acid, it's just a different formulation of the B9. And so that goes into the brain with the transporter. It goes in this like a side door. So it's going this non-main route into the brain. Whereas 5-MTHF, that uses that main transporter. So when there are antibodies blocking that main transporter, you can keep taking 5-MTHF, but it's not really going to get to where it needs to be.
So what are you hearing from your... I'm sorry, what are you hearing from your constituency? Because, you get feedback constantly from parents, people who visit your website, autism.net, AWE-tism.net. Are people saying that this is the bomb for their kid, or, is it kind of a, 30-70 proposition?
So there are some parents who don't want to do the blood test to find out if the child has the antibodies.
So that gives us a little more precision medicine. In other words, you find out if you have the receptors, and that's not a standard blood test. That's a kind of an esoteric blood test, right?
Yes. It is not standard. There's one lab in the U.S. that has this lab test. And I always recommend to do testing so that you remove all this guesswork. Some parents don't want to do the testing. The test is a ballpark around $300.
Okay.
So it certainly is an investment, but I think it gives you so much more value and clarity as to whether or not something like this is appropriate. Now, yes, a ballpark 70% of kids with autism have these antibodies. So some parents are just, kind of rolling the dice on that. But I really think it's best for parents to use medical information as much as possible so that they take that guesswork out of it. So for kids who do have the antibodies and the parents give the leucovorin, there are life-changing instances where kids are going from not speaking to speaking. There's a lot of nuances, right?
Sure.
So we talked a little bit earlier about how things seem to change overnight, right? And on social media, you might see a parent show, oh, this was my child 6 weeks ago, and here it is. But there's a lot that happens in those 6 weeks. So you titrate the dose. You don't start at the optimal dose. And many times you don't even know what the optimal dose is because this research is new. It has been, the first clinical trial was done over 20 years ago. But again, when there's not a pharmaceutical company that can make $1 billion, research goes a lot more slowly and you don't get that quality data because people are paying out of pocket for this or writing grants for this.
This is a so-called repurposed drug. It's been around for as long as I've been practicing medicine. Originally used when people took the drug methotrexate. They took leucovorin as to somewhat antidote the side effects of the methotrexate. So, I knew about it, when I started in medicine in the 80s, and it's repurposed for this. So you mentioned, these sometimes you go on social media and you see these fabulous reports of this, that, or the other thing is the miracle fix for whatever god-awful malady you have. And you've sort of inveighed against the TikTok mentality, which is can be misleading. What's your take on social media in terms of getting the word out? I mean, you participate in effect on social media, but they're the responsible people, and then they're the people who are kind of making sensationalistic claims and sometimes claims that are linked to commercial interests. And so how do you safeguard against that?
So there's some interesting research that was done about 2 years ago. Scientists analyzed the top 100 videos on TikTok relating to autism. And they were analyzing it as to whether the truthfulness of what they were saying. And it turns out that of the most popular videos on TikTok relating specifically to autism, 70% of them were either wrong or over-dramatized.
So it's it's almost like a reverse merit system. You might not even be in the top 70% because you're rational. You're not making, outlandish claims, and, that doesn't garner a lot of clicks.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what happens. So for parents, I always recommend you can use something like TikTok for ideas, right? Like when you're brainstorming. But you can't use it to actually make decisions for your child because you have to go in and vet the information. You should get different tests to see, does this apply to my child? And then a lot of times when parents are doing things, and let's say things are going slower or there's been a step backwards or something like that, then they see different videos and they start to be really hard on themselves. And they really start to say, oh, see, you're not doing a good job. And everybody else, their kids are getting better. And that's not helpful to the parent at all either.
It's kind of like, comparing yourself, to touched up videos that have been, highly stylized and AI, enhanced.
It's not realistic.
Right. It's like, exactly. It's something that a lot, especially teenage girls and boys now, are prey to on the internet. Let's talk a little bit about the role of vitamin D, because it seems like vitamin D is kind of the Swiss Army knife for a wide variety of maladies. What's the evidence on vitamin D, and is there a correlation, and has there been some research?
There has been research on autism and vitamin D, and of no surprise, most kids with autism are deficient in vitamin D, as really is anyone if they're not taking supplementation. And again, this is where you have conventional medicine who will say one level it's okay, it's adequate, right? But then you have functional medicine who say, all right, if you really want optimal health, you want it to be at a much higher level.
Especially if you have a challenging condition.
Exactly. Like if you have any immune system involvement whatsoever, then you're going to need a higher amount of vitamin D. And that's something I noticed with parents as I worked with them was their child would need a certain amount of vitamin D. And as their health got better, they still need vitamin D, but not as much, right? And you monitor vitamin D levels maybe twice a year, once a year with a blood test, right? So you remove any of that mystery or that concern. Am I giving too much? So vitamin D is really vital. And there are times where kids have problems with sleep, and all it is they need adequate vitamin D.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a game changer. So it's one of those nutrients that is really foundational for so many aspects. And it's really important for parents to do the blood test. And I know blood test is not fun for any child whatsoever. But it's definitely something that is important to know.
And you mentioned sleep problems, and one of the controversial treatments for sleep problems in kids is melatonin. We're warned off of melatonin for kids, and sometimes kids end up in the emergency room because they get into mom and dad's melatonin stash. I'm not convinced that it's that harmful or dangerous, but I generally recommend that, for ordinary kids who have minor sleep problems, maybe hold off on the melatonin until they've passed a certain developmental milestone, past adolescence. But these kids have really serious circadian rhythm problems. It's a problem for the parents, but you don't want to knock out the kid artificially. But is there research on the safety or desirability of melatonin for to reset the circadian rhythms and improve sleep in kids with autism?
So yes, melatonin is one of the most studied supplement in autism. It's widely used, and there have been multi-year studies to try and understand the safety of it. And the researchers conclude that melatonin is safe to use for a couple of years. It's not anything a parent really wants to do, and many parents feel guilty giving their child melatonin.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's starting to understand, all right, that is a short-term fix.
And
that's not a long-term fix,
Yeah.
right? So you don't want to give your child melatonin for the next 10 years, right?
Yeah.
That is not a solution. So it's certainly fine to use for the short term, but it's then really important to go a step further and say, what is the problem here? So a lot of times that is different gut issues, right? Different gut infections. And sometimes
Light
kids have
exposure,
taken antibiotics.
meal timing, all these things that exercise, the things that can actually kind of help reset our circadian rhythm in kids who have trouble establishing a normal circadian rhythm. So, yeah.
Right. And inflammation in the gut is also a huge contributing factor.
Where melatonin plays a major
issues.
role. There's actually many-fold times the amount of melatonin generated in the gut as there is in the brain, apparently.
Correct. Yeah. So it's important. I've seen parents who've, did things with like licorice and really nutrients to help decrease the inflammation, butyrate, and then sleep. Just that wasn't the intention, right? But then sleep starts to become easier.
Interesting.
So it's really important to have that focus of, all right, we can have a short-term fix, but then what is the real long-term health issue that is preventing this child from doing whatever it is, like falling asleep or being able to focus in school more? It's fine to have that short-term approach because we all need relief, right? It's not, I know what it's like to not sleep for a long time. It's not helpful whatsoever.
Indeed. Okay, folks, at this point, let's pause and allow one of our sponsors an opportunity to share an important message to you. So here goes. Listen up.
Are you concerned about your blood pressure? Join the millions worldwide who have chosen Kyolic as a natural alternative to support their heart health. Why Kyolic? It works. Over 900 published scientific articles and research studies have shown that Kyolic aged garlic extract has a positive effect on cardiovascular risk factors such as high blood pressure, cholesterol, circulation, blood sugar balance, and more. Kyolic aged garlic extract, organically grown garlic aged for up to 20 months for maximum purity and potency. Gentle on the stomach, easy to swallow capsules with no offensive garlic odor or taste. Visit Kyolic.com. That's KYOLIC.com. Learn about Kyolic Formula 109 for blood pressure, as well as Kyolic's other cardiovascular formulas. Kyolic is sold at Sprouts, Natural Grocers, Whole Foods, and natural health stores everywhere. Also online. Get Kyolic Blood Pressure Health Formula 109. It works.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting our sponsors. They are what make intelligent medicine a continuing free resource to you. And now back to our discussion about autism with Dr. Teresa Lyons. So I think the most dramatic evidence for the role that the microbiome plays in neurodevelopmental disorders is evidence from kind of an extreme intervention, which is fecal transplants. You've studied this, and this can actually sort of change the trajectory sometimes of kids. I mean, we're not saying it's a one-size-fits-all approach or panacea, but it is tantalizing evidence that altering the microbiome by whatever means, whether diet, probiotics, or ultimately fecal transplants, that it can change the whole system and actually have impacts on the nervous system.
Yeah, it certainly can. So there's different research. I do want to caution parents again. So it doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah.
And that's the important. Parents hear these stories and then they just latch onto it. So it has about an 80% success rate, and success is defined very differently. So there are some kids.
Shall we say response rate necessary?
Response rate, yeah. That would be much better.
Yeah.
And so again, fecal transplant has been FDA approved for Clostridia infections.
Right.
So they've just taken that a step further, and there's been different research that showed when children took vancomycin, which is active against Clostridia, right, they saw a lot of the symptoms decrease. So repetitiveness,
kills a lot of other bacteria. It's kind of it reshuffles the deck in your microbiome.
It does.
Yeah,
it definitely does. So what happened is parents and researchers took that a step further and said, all right, how about we take that same approach and really see how much it impacts kids with autism. So there are clinical trials going on right now, and there is a company that is driving that. And there are successes, certainly when gut involvement is one of the root causes.
Right.
Then that makes sense for parents to look at. But it's not the first thing to do because there's so much in that. The transplant. Where are you getting the transplant from? Do you want, there's many choices that goes into this.
It's much more complicated than a blood transfusion, which is the ABO system. There's so many different ramifications to who the donor is and, the compatibility of the donor with the recipient.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And compatibility is something that's not well understood.
Yeah.
Like we understand that for blood, but this is not well studied enough for fecal transplant, especially on a developing child.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes the transplant, the parents that I've worked with, they've done either a sibling or a cousin or, someone close to them. But there are also transplants that are done with, kids that are not related whatsoever.
So-called healthy donors.
Correct. Yeah.
That are screened, obviously, for infection, whatever infectious diseases they can detect. So, yeah.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a lot that goes into it. It's certainly an option. It wouldn't be the first thing to try. That's why it's really important to have some of that focus on that basic health, right? You wouldn't want to jump to FMT if vitamin D is not optimal, right? Because you're not even setting yourself up for success. You wouldn't want to do FMT if your child's living in a moldy environment, right? Because that's putting pressure on the immune system. So there's a lot of things to do first before doing some of these large, major things. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but you just want to be very strategic in how you approach.
Is there a role for probiotics? Any research on that? And, now we're in the era of not just any old probiotic, not just Dannon yogurt, but we're talking about functional probiotics that may be targeted to specific outcomes, such as brain health.
Yeah. So there are different so this is usually driven by commercial interests.
Yes, and there's some pretty audacious claims about it. I agree.
Yes, and there are some small clinical trials that have been done specifically in the autism space that can show some improvement in different symptoms relating to autism based upon giving probiotics. Some of those probiotics are quite expensive. They end up being maybe like $150 a month. So again, it's really important for parents to be strategic and not just hear something like that and then spend $150 a month, not see the results that they want, and then really get discouraged.
You mentioned other types of diets, and rather than going through all 8 different diet permutations, is there evidence for a ketogenic diet? Because we know that in kids with refractory epilepsy, which is a brain disorder, that we do sometimes see a response to a very low carb or no carb diet and a ketogenic diet, which is very challenging to implement. But hey, the stakes are high here. What does the research say about ketogenic diets?
There's clinical trials that have been done in autism on ketogenic. It definitely is a great diet. I mean, that diet's been around for over 100 years.
Sure.
So it's very effective for those with seizures. And that is part of why some of the diets that kids with autism respond to have reduced carbohydrate percentages. So there is benefit for that, certainly, but there's no research that I'm aware of specifically on the ketogenic and autism.
Can we stipulate that there may be certainly a rationale for the use of relatively unadulterated, unprocessed organic foods because of the potential for maybe not all kids are sensitive to food dyes, artificial colorings, pesticides and herbicides. Maybe some kids manage to grow up and be NBA basketball players while eating, Yoo-hoos. But, other kids, there may be a subset of kids who have a sensitivity to that. And it may be, not a unreasonable intervention to eat clean.
Yeah. So eating clean, the whole reason why going organic is to decrease that burden on the immune system, right? So decreasing toxic load. It certainly makes sense, but there's more impact on certain kids than others. And this is where starting to loop in genetics makes sense, because certain kids really have genetic defects when it comes to detoxification. And so if that is something that this child is having, then it makes more sense to have as much of a clean environment as possible, including organic foods, clean air at home. So that's where the complexity of autism lies, because eating organic is not going to impact every child with autism exactly the same way.
Right. So we could actually get a picture of that by looking at certain SNPs on a simple cheek swab that you can submit for genetic analysis. And the cost has come down on those that used to cost thousands of dollars. Now we can do through high throughput analysis, we can actually get a profile that talks about detoxification pathways, vitamin D pathways, what are called MTHFR pathways for, methylation, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe that can yield some clues as to, what the most likely interventions might be based on a kid's genetics, because we're all different. We have our Achilles heels. Right.
And so that's how you can loop in the Tylenol or acetaminophen discussion that happened at the presidential level. So if somebody has, let's say, genetic susceptibility to detoxification, or maybe their glutathione pathway, which is glutathione is your like master antioxidant detoxifier, right? So if somebody struggles with that, then you would want to be mindful of acetaminophen, something that can decrease those levels. And that's really where that personalized medicine comes in, and really knowing what goes into health. I mean, I said, like 20 years ago, I was not thinking at this level of so many different aspects to health. But when you have a child with autism, in many ways you have to, because their health gets impacted in so many different ways, differently than any other people.
Indeed. So recently there have been some studies that kind of repudiate the view that Tylenol during pregnancy is implicated in autism. And it may be, as with some other studies, where overall that it is not the case. If you look statistically at, hundreds of thousands of women, but if you look at a subset of perhaps, 5 or 10% of women who have faulty glutathione synthesis pathways, where we know that Tylenol depletes glutathione, maybe, just maybe, it's not the greatest idea to take Tylenol in pregnancy. For that subset of women, other women may be more resilient to the effects, which are passed on to the, via the placenta to the fetus, and the fetus may also have detoxification liabilities.
Correct. But I think the important thing is this discussion, right? So women can start to think about, am I having any detoxification issues? How is my glutathione levels, right? If a woman is going to get pregnant, it would be great, regardless of whether she takes Tylenol or not, for her to have adequate glutathione levels in her body, for her baby, for her future. So I don't think there's a drawback to having this discussion.
Which argues for preconceptual planning. Yeah, right?
Correct.
Yeah, which I think is a burgeoning area in the field of medicine and nutrition, is to get men and women, because men are implicated here too, in the healthiest condition possible, because there's so many issues around fertility and around, unfortunately, birth defects and problems, that maybe it behooves us to look not at the child, but to look at the parents. I wanted to get also into talking a little bit about essential fatty acids, because I know that that's something that you've discussed at Autism.net, the role of essential fatty acids for the brain for these kids. I'm pretty sure that's a strategy that you have resorted to with your daughter.
So definitely, I take fatty acids. I know how much it impacts even me. Sometimes during the summer, I try and take a vacation from those big pills. And then I always think, oh no, I feel much better when I take them. So that's my personal experience. But there are different clinical trials that have been done specifically to understand focus and performance at school. And there are different products out there. Usually they'll have a higher ratio of a particular fatty acid, DHA, which really has more neuroinflammation impact into the brain. So omega-3s get very complex very quickly, and you can use them to strategically focus on different areas of the body. So for a parent whose child is having difficulty with focusing, there are different supplements with the fatty acids that can provide the brain some of that fuel that it needs. But then when there's general inflammation, that's important as well for fatty acids. So they're really great.
Indeed. And you actually made some mention of something that's a little more esoteric, which is black seed, which is kind of new on the in the marketplace, but all kinds of very amazing claims are being made about it. Did you do a deep dive on that in relationship to autism support? What's your take?
I did. Yeah. So parents ask me to review different things. And so that request came from a parent. I have parents who ask me to review different products. So I do that on my YouTube channel. For black seed oil, it's really popular right now as an anti-inflammatory. And so the parent was asking, should I do this? And so there is no published literature on autism specifically and black seed oil. But there's lots of research showing the beneficial impacts for decreasing inflammation. So it's, again, just teaching the parents, okay, if inflammation is a problem for their child, these are different options. And this is something that you can definitely talk to their doctor about. It gives them at least a reasonable place to have a conversation with the doctor.
So finally, how can parents who are interested in a functional medicine approach for autism find a physician who is acquainted with that? And, it's kind of caveat emptor, because there may be some physicians who hold themselves out as experts, and maybe they're just dilettantes at that, and they're making, perhaps overarching claims about their ability to overcome this condition. I mean, is there an organization, or is there a directory, or do you provide recommendations at autism.net about where to go and how to find these types of experts?
Yeah, so I wrote a book in 2020. It's called The Lions Report, and in that I explained what functional medicine is, why it's necessary, and then I provided a listing of doctors that I interviewed, all of them. And I made sure I would have used any of them. That was the criteria. Would I use this doctor for my daughter? That was the criteria. And this year I'm releasing an updated version to that. There are definitely more doctors. The thing with autism is it's important for the parent to get a good understanding on their own what are the health issues? Because autism is so vast. There are some doctors who are like really good on mitochondria, but they are not good when it comes to
which is a
anything
consideration,
related to
by the way.
gut.
I think addressing mitochondrial dysfunction is a big issue because the energetics of the brain is like 1/20th of the weight of the body, but it takes up 20% of the energy demands of the body. So working on mitochondrial support with all the different nutrients that go into that, I think that is important.
Yeah, and it's vital for some kids. For some kids, that is the root cause, but not for all kids. So for the kids where mitochondria is real a concern, they want to work with a doctor who has that mitochondria focus. So I've seen a lot of mismatches when, let's say, a parent whose child has gut issues hears of the reputation, oh, this doctor is really great, right? And they go there, and the doctor has the focus of mitochondria. But this child doesn't have that much of a mitochondrial issue. So then this is where a parent gets frustrated and say, oh, it didn't work, right? Because they were trying to do something that didn't really need attention or focus. So the key really is for parents to get a good understanding of what their child needs and then match the child's needs to the doctor. A lot of times parents do it the reverse. They just hear a good doctor and they go to them. And unfortunately, that's when just things don't work as well as they can.
So that resource is still available. It's the Lions Report 2020, and I checked, and it's still available on Amazon and all the usual sources.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And then the updated version is coming out this summer.
Oh, good. That's something to look forward to because, things change and new practitioners emerge and other practitioners sometimes retire from the fray. So, yeah. Okay.
They do. Yeah.
Good stuff.
They certainly do.
All right. It's an exciting area. I'm excited about MAHA in its efforts, sometimes, maybe a little bit mischaracterized in their effort to come to understand the root cause of our epidemic of childhood diseases, among which are neurobehavioral disorders, and autism certainly fits the bill. And I think that we're going to see progress. More money is being allocated to this. There's more interest in this. We're more
discussion.
Yeah, and we're not just looking at
pharmaceutical
panaceas, although we welcome those. We're also looking at root causes and lifestyle factors that may impact this. So, yeah, all of the above approach, that's welcome. That's something that you've employed with your daughter, and we wish you a lot of success. So, Teresa Lyons, it's spelled Lyons. Check out Autism, as in awe, like awesome, autism.net, right?
Correct.
Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Lyons. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Dr. Ronald Hoffman, and this is the Intelligent Medicine Podcast. I want to thank you for listening to the Intelligent Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or your favorite podcast app, and get new episodes automatically downloaded every weekday. And please give us a rating and review. It truly helps new people discover intelligent medicine. The Intelligent Medicine Podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice, and no doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical condition they may have and should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Finally, please visit drhoffman.com and discover everything intelligent medicine has to offer, including frequently updated, unbiased health news and fully vetted product and supplement recommendations. There were many important reasons why I started my FullScript online supplement dispensary. I wanted to offer you the same curated professional-grade supplement brands that I use, the ones I know and trust. I also wanted to ensure that they weren't counterfeit or expired. Recently, I've been hearing more and more about counterfeit or expired products purchased from online retailers. With FullScript, you can be confident your supplements are genuine and they'll arrive with optimal freshness and potency. Also, buying through FullScript offers fast, free shipping, optional refill reminders, and a highly rated mobile app. It's safe, secure, HIPAA compliant, and offers world-class support. Go to drhoffmanstore.com for more information and to start your free FullScript account. You'll get access to the supplements and features you need to help you achieve your wellness goals, including my custom targeted protocols that combine the products I recommend to address specific needs: heart health, immune support, and much more. To get started, just go to drhoffmanstore.com, drhoffmanstore.com.